curtain rises and a child smiles. The audience gasps, enchanted. For a moment, it feels like magic, pure innocence captured in celluloid. But behind those bright eyes and rehearsed lines, there was often no childhood at all. During Hollywood's golden age, the studios discovered their most powerful weapon: children. They were charming, marketable, and unstoppable at the box office. The faces of Shirley Temple, Judy Garland, and Jackie Coogan lit up the darkest years of the Great Depression and carried audiences through wartime uncertainty. But while the world adored them, their lives were not their own. In an era dominated by the studio system, contracts were signed not with the children, but over them. Long hours under hot lights replaced playgrounds. Stage mothers and studio executives decided when they ate, when they slept, and even when they smiled. Pills to wake them up, pills to calm them down, pills to keep them thin. The Dream Factory built its empire on the backs of children who barely understood the price of fame. For some, that price meant losing their fortune to greedy parents. For others, it meant living in the shadow of a childhood image they could never escape. And for a tragic few, it meant an early death, mourned by millions who never knew the truth of what had been stolen from them. This is the untold story of Hollywood's child stars, their glittering rise, the hidden torment behind the camera, and the haunting legacy they left behind. They were adored by millions, but the one thing they could never hold on to was their childhood. To understand why so many children were swallowed by Hollywood's golden age, we have to look at the system that controlled it all, the studio system. From the 1920s through the 1950s, the major studios, MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and others, operated less like movie companies and more like factories. Stars were not artists, but products. And child stars? They were marketed as treasures of innocence, carefully packaged and ruthlessly controlled. Studios signed young actors to long-term contracts, binding them to grueling schedules with little regard for their well-being. These contracts looked glamorous on the surface: money, fame, and promises of a glittering future. But in reality, they were iron chains. A child could spend 12 hours a day on set, followed by rehearsals, voice coaching, and endless publicity tours. Education became an afterthought, squeezed into a few hours with on-set tutors. Childhood, friends, school dances, afternoons in the sun was sacrificed on the altar of stardom. Jackie Coogan was one of the first to reveal the brutal truth. Discovered by Charlie Chaplin and catapulted to fame in The Kid, 1921, Coogan earned millions before he was even a teenager. Yet when he came of age, he discovered that his parents had spent nearly all of it. The betrayal sparked outrage, leading to the creation of the Coogan Law, designed to protect a portion of child actors' earnings. But even this safeguard couldn't stop the deeper exploitation: the loss of autonomy, identity, and innocence. Studios knew how to polish an image, but they also knew how to break spirits. Executives demanded that children be thinner, cuter, more marketable. If that meant strict diets, it was enforced. If it meant medication to stay awake, it was prescribed. If a smile had to be faked, it was commanded. In their eyes, these weren't children, they were investments. And so the machine kept turning, producing box office hits and childhood icons, while behind the scenes, it consumed the very lives it profited from. The Coogan case exposed one form of theft: financial abuse. But as the years went on, Hollywood found new ways to rob its youngest stars. And perhaps no story reveals that better than Judy Garland's, the little girl with the golden voice who was never allowed to sleep. She was just a child when the world first heard her sing. Born Frances Ethel Gum in 1922, Judy Garland seemed destined for the stage. By the time she was 13, she had signed with MGM, the most powerful studio of Hollywood's golden age. They didn't see Frances, the awkward, shy girl from Minnesota. They saw Judy, a marketable product, a voice that could melt hearts, and a face that could sell millions of tickets. From the moment she walked through MGM's gates, Judy was no longer a child. She was an asset. Executives decided everything about her life, from the bows in her hair to the food on her plate. They told her she was too plump, too ordinary, too flawed to be a star. To fix her, they placed her on strict diets, banning her favorite foods and monitoring every bite. But that was only the beginning. The studio had a brutal solution for Judy's exhaustion. Long filming days often stretched past midnight, and MGM couldn't afford a star who needed rest. So they gave her little pills, amphetamines to keep her awake, barbiturates to help her sleep, and more to suppress her appetite. At just 15 years old, Judy Garland was already dependent on a cocktail of drugs, prescribed not by doctors concerned for her health, but by studio bosses concerned for their profits. When The Wizard of Oz 1939 premiered, Judy's place in history was sealed. Her performance as Dorothy, with her angelic voice singing "Over the Rainbow," became one of cinema's most iconic moments. The world adored her, but behind the applause, Judy was unraveling. During filming, MGM executives forced her into a suffocating corset to make her look younger, while studio chaperones hovered, controlling her every move. Even on set, she was never truly free. Her private life mirrored the same exploitation. Her mother, often described as overbearing and ambitious, pushed Judy relentlessly, prioritizing fame over her daughter's well-being. As Judy once confessed, "My mother was the real Wicked Witch of the West." The pressure at home and the suffocating demands of MGM left her isolated. Her only escape was the very stage that imprisoned her. As she transitioned into adulthood, the toll of her childhood became painfully clear. MGM continued to manipulate her, pairing her with leading men who towered over her, demanding that she smile through exhaustion, covering her insecurities with layers of makeup. She longed for normalcy, a chance to be just Judy, but the world only wanted Dorothy. By her 20s, the pills had taken hold. Dependency turned into addiction, addiction into desperation. Relationships failed, marriages crumbled, and her reputation began to fracture under the weight of missed rehearsals and public meltdowns. The same studio that had created Judy Garland now branded her as unreliable and unstable. Still, she fought. She delivered breathtaking performances in Meet Me in St. Louis, 1944, A Star is Born, 1954, and countless concerts that reminded audiences why they had fallen in love with her voice. On stage, she was radiant, vulnerable, powerful, and raw. But when the curtain fell, she returned to a life marked by loneliness, addiction, and the echoes of a childhood stolen. By the late 1960s, Judy Garland was a legend, but a fragile one. On June 22, 1969, at just 47 years old, she was found dead in London, the result of an accidental overdose. The girl who had given the world its most hopeful anthem, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," was gone long before her time. Judy's story is often remembered as one of talent and tragedy, but at its core, it is the story of a child who was never allowed to grow up. Hollywood gave her immortality, but in exchange, it robbed her of peace, health, and happiness. Her voice still echoes across generations, haunting in its beauty, heartbreaking in its truth. For Judy Garland, fame was never freedom. It was a prison with golden bars, and she was not alone. Other child stars would face the same machine, idolized in childhood, discarded in adulthood, left searching for lives they were never allowed to live. Among them, America's sweetheart herself, Shirley Temple. Long before Judy Garland was forced to follow the yellow brick road, another little girl had already become Hollywood's most powerful weapon against despair. Her name was Shirley Temple, and during the darkest days of the Great Depression, she wasn't just an actress, she was America's salvation. With her bouncing curls, dimpled smile, and a voice sweet enough to lift spirits in the bleakest of times, Shirley Temple became the highest-grossing box office star in the world before she even turned 10. Her films, Bright Eyes, 1934, Curly Top, 1935, Heidi, 1937, were sugar-coated fantasies that audiences craved. In a country where breadlines stretched around city blocks, her cheerful songs and dances gave hope. But what the world saw as innocence was, behind the scenes, carefully engineered perfection. Shirley's life was scripted by studios and stage parents who treated her not as a child, but as a product. Her hair was curled into 24 exact ringlets for every appearance. Her smile was rehearsed, her gestures choreographed, her image sold in dolls, merchandise, and advertisements. She became the first true child superstar, a brand before she was old enough to understand what branding meant. The pressure was relentless. Other children her age played outside. Shirley worked 6-day weeks, memorizing lines, singing rehearsed songs, and filming take after take under blinding studio lights. The camera captured a joyful child, but the reality was exhaustion, isolation, and a life lived entirely in front of others. When Shirley entered adolescence, the magic began to fade. The very image that had made her untouchable, the adorable, precocious little girl, became a cage. Audiences who adored the child could not accept the teenager. By her mid-teens, her films were no longer hits. At just 22 years old, she retired from acting altogether. Shirley Temple would go on to reinvent herself, later becoming a respected U.S. diplomat. But the girl who once carried Hollywood on her shoulders never truly had a childhood of her own. If Shirley Temple represented the polished dream of Hollywood childhood, Jackie Coogan embodied its darkest betrayal. Discovered by Charlie Chaplin and immortalized in The Kid, 1921, Coogan became one of the first child megastars in cinema. His expressive eyes and heartbreaking innocence turned him into a global sensation. By age 12, he had earned an astonishing fortune, millions of dollars in today's terms. But when Jackie reached adulthood, he discovered a devastating truth. Nearly all of his money was gone. His mother and stepfather had spent or squandered it, leaving him with nothing. The betrayal was so shocking, it triggered public outrage, eventually leading to the passing of the Coogan Law in 1939. This law required a portion of child actors' earnings to be set aside in trust until they turned 18. Yet even with the law, financial security could not protect children from the deeper wounds of the system. Jackie Coogan's career never recovered from the transition into adulthood. He struggled to find roles, his fame fading almost as quickly as it had arrived. He would later find some stability in character roles and even a strange revival as Uncle Fester in the Addams Family TV series. But the betrayal he suffered remained a permanent scar. Both Shirley Temple and Jackie Coogan reveal the paradox of Hollywood's golden age. Children were celebrated as saviors of the screen, adored by audiences, and yet behind the applause, they were robbed of normal lives, of security, and of their very identities. For Shirley, the cost was the loss of a childhood and the burden of being forever frozen in time as America's little darling. For Jackie, it was the betrayal of trust, discovering that the people who were supposed to protect him had used him instead. Their stories prove that even when the cameras stopped rolling, the spotlight never truly left these children. It followed them into adulthood like a shadow, demanding they live up to the myth that had been created before they were old enough to decide who they wanted to be. But for some, the price was even higher. It wasn't just money or innocence or identity. For some child stars, the spotlight would follow them into the darkness and end their lives in tragedy. And perhaps no case haunts Hollywood's history more than that of Natalie Wood, the starlet who grew up under the camera's gaze, only to meet a mysterious and untimely end. She was 5 years old when the cameras first found her. Born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko in San Francisco in 1938, she would later be known to the world as Natalie Wood. From the very beginning, her life was scripted, not by her own choices, but by her mother's unyielding ambition. Maria Zakharenko believed her daughter was destined for stardom, and she would stop at nothing to make it happen. Maria's control was chilling. When directors hesitated to hire her daughter, Maria pushed harder. She was known to whisper threats to Natalie during auditions. "If you don't get this part, I'll kill your dog." It was manipulation dressed as motivation. The little girl who should have been chasing butterflies in a yard was instead chasing the approval of strangers in casting rooms. By age 8, Natalie had already appeared in a string of films, including Miracle on 34th Street, 1947, where her charm made audiences believe in Santa Claus all over again. Hollywood had found its new darling. But as Natalie's star rose, so did the expectations. Directors demanded she cry on cue, and Maria ensured she did, sometimes by pulling cruel tricks to trigger real tears. Childhood became a performance, emotions a currency. As she entered her teenage years, Natalie's career did not slow, it accelerated. Unlike many child stars, she successfully transitioned into adult roles, most famously opposite James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, 1955. The film cemented her as one of Hollywood's brightest young talents. But beneath the glamour, Natalie carried scars invisible to the camera. She later spoke of a dark secret from her youth, being sexually assaulted by a powerful Hollywood figure in her teens. She never revealed his name publicly, but the trauma lingered, shaping her struggles with trust, love, and self-worth. In the 1960s, Natalie reached the height of her career with roles in Splendor in the Grass in 1961 and West Side Story in 1961. She was beautiful, bankable, and beloved. To the public, she was living the dream. But privately, she was plagued by anxiety and a fear of deep water that had haunted her since childhood. Ironically, it would be this fear that became most tied to her fate. Her personal life was as dramatic as her films. She married actor Robert Wagner in 1957, divorced him in 1962, and remarried him in 1972. Their relationship was volatile, full of passion, but also marked by jealousy and conflict. Friends described it as both deeply loving and dangerously toxic. Natalie sought stability but was often left adrift between Wagner's possessiveness and her own insecurities. On the weekend of November 28, 1981, Natalie joined Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern, on a trip aboard the Splendor, off the coast of California's Catalina Island. What was supposed to be a relaxing getaway turned into one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. That night, an argument broke out on the yacht. Accounts differ, but witnesses confirmed raised voices. Hours later, Natalie was missing. Her body was found the next morning, floating face down in the water, dressed in a nightgown, socks, and a down jacket. She was only 43 years old. The official ruling was accidental drowning, but questions immediately arose. Natalie had always feared water, so why would she leave the yacht alone in the dark? Why was there bruising on her arms and legs? Why did her husband, Robert Wagner, delay calling for help when he realized she was gone? The inconsistencies fueled decades of speculation. Theories swirled. Was it an accident? A tragic misstep as she tried to board a dinghy? Or was it something darker? An argument turned deadly, a push, a silence too heavy to break. Christopher Walken, who was present that night, has rarely spoken publicly about what happened. Wagner, for his part, has always denied wrongdoing, insisting it was a terrible accident. But in 2011, the case was reopened by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department after new witnesses came forward. In 2018, Robert Wagner was officially named a person of interest, though no charges were filed. To this day, Natalie Wood's death remains unresolved, her story frozen between fact and suspicion. Natalie's life is remembered as both triumph and tragedy. She defied the curse of many child stars, successfully growing into an adult icon, but she never escaped the chains forged in her childhood. The controlling mother, the exploitation, the trauma, the fear. Her mysterious death serves as a haunting metaphor for her entire life, adored in the spotlight, but lost in the shadows. Hollywood wanted Natalie Wood to be perfect, an angelic child, a radiant star, a glamorous wife. But the real Natalie was far more complex, fragile, and human. The tragedy is not just how she died, but how little of her life was truly her own. Her story underscores the central truth of Hollywood's golden age child stars. They were cherished by millions, but consumed by an industry that demanded everything and gave back nothing. And when we step back to see the bigger picture, it becomes clear. Natalie's tragedy was not an exception, but part of a pattern. The golden age gave us timeless films and unforgettable faces. But for the children who lived it, the cost was far greater than fame could ever repay. When we look back at Hollywood's golden age, the images seem timeless. Shirley Temple dancing with infectious joy, Jackie Coogan's wide eyes melting hearts in the kid, Judy Garland singing about a rainbow that promised something better. Natalie Wood shimmering across the screen, beautiful and untouchable. These faces became part of American culture, symbols of hope, innocence, and magic. But behind the curtain, the truth was far less magical. These children were bound to contracts that stripped them of control over their own lives. They were pushed to work hours that would be illegal today. They were given pills instead of sleep, diets instead of dinners, stage directions instead of affection. Hollywood created an illusion of eternal youth, but in doing so, it stole the very thing it claimed to celebrate, childhood itself. Some, like Shirley Temple, found a second act beyond Hollywood, building new identities outside the industry. Others, like Jackie Coogan, carried scars of betrayal but fought to protect future generations. Judy Garland never escaped the prison of fame, her voice forever echoing with the pain of lost innocence. And Natalie Wood's story ended not with a curtain call, but with a mystery that still lingers like a shadow over the industry. Their stories forced Hollywood and society to ask difficult questions. How much is too much to ask of a child? What responsibility do parents, studios, and audiences bear when adoring a star means exploiting a child? Laws like the Coogan Act helped, but no legislation could return the stolen years, the fractured identities, the broken lives. Today, the entertainment industry is more aware. Safeguards exist for child actors, from stricter labor laws to financial protections, yet the ghosts of the golden age still whisper warnings. Because the hunger for fame, the allure of money, and the pressure of audiences haven't disappeared, they've only evolved. The spotlight is as bright as ever, and for every child who thrives under it, there are still those who are consumed by it. In the end, the legacy of Hollywood's child stars is bittersweet. They gave the world unforgettable performances, shaping the history of cinema itself. But the cost was their freedom, their innocence, and often their peace. They entertained millions, but many spent their lives longing for something the camera could never give back, the chance to simply be children. As the credits of their lives roll in our collective memory, one truth remains clear. The golden age was built on borrowed youth. The films endure, the faces never fade. But behind the magic lies the echo of a question Hollywood could never answer. Was it worth the price?